else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into all the stories that have got you talking today. An emergency debate on MP standards is taking place in the Commons right now, and there's allegations of sleaze and corruption. God, they seem to be flying everywhere at the moment, those allegations, don't they? I wonder, do you think we need better people in politics? Do we need better rules? Or what about a combination of the two? Plus, after accepting money from the family fortune of the fascist leader Sir Oswald Mosley, Oxford University and other institutions have been accused of losing their moral compass. Have they? And staff at one of the world's biggest investment companies are told that they now need to get special approval to hire white men over women and ethnic minority candidates. I wonder, Does diversity now trump talent? And this week sees the deadline for care workers to be fully vaccinated if they want to keep their job. Those who haven't had the job have been called selfish. Are they? And all of that and more to come. But first, the news headlines.
Hello, these are your latest GB News headlines. MPs have today been debating last week's vote to block the suspension of Owen Paterson and to overhaul parliamentary standards. The Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, says that any changes to misconduct proceedings must be done with cross-party support. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of corroding the trust between voters and politicians. And Lib Dem Chief Whip Wendy Chamberlain says the government's actions last week have tarnished the House of Commons' reputation. Boris Johnson has not attended the debate today but says he does take accusations of government corruption seriously.
Last week, the Prime Minister damaged himself. And despite the bravery of some members opposite, he damaged his party. But most importantly, he damaged our democracy.
It is hard to be proud to be a Member of Parliament when, as a body, we are all tarnished with the government's brush. When, in the eyes of the public, we are tainted by allegations of sleaze. What gives the government the right to have a vote to change the process just because it has adversely affected one of their own? This is an appalling message to send to the wider public.
The government says penalties for appalling sexual offences will be re-examined following the case of David Fuller. The hospital electrician has admitted murdering, then sexually assaulting 2 women decades before carrying out dozens of sex attacks on corpses in mortuaries. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has announced Sir Jonathan Michael will chair an independent inquiry. He told the Commons that support had been put in place for the families of the victims and staff impacted by the crimes.
Officers have tragically found evidence of 100 victims. Of these victims, 81 have been formally identified, and specially trained family liaison officers have been supporting their families. Every family of a known victim has been contacted.
President Obama says larger nations must shoulder more of the burden of fixing the global climate crisis. Speaking at the COP26 summit in Glasgow, he said if we don't act now, then it'll be too late for island nations.
But there is one thing that should transcend our day-to-day politics and normal geopolitics, and that is climate change. It's not just that we can't afford to go backward, we can't afford to stay where we are. The world has to step up, and it has to step up now.
UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors, but they must take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. British Airways and Virgin Atlantic synchronised their departures from London's Heathrow Airport this morning to the United States to mark the occasion. Virgin Atlantic CEO Shai Weiss says he hopes Virgin Atlantic will be at full capacity by 2023.
There is hope and positivity out there. By this year end, so by December 31, we would have returned over 1,000 cabin crew and 150 pilots that we had to sadly let go during the pandemic are returning to fly and serve at Virgin Atlantic. So I think that gives you the sense of direction of where we're going with this.
Almost 250 cavers have joined the rescue mission to save a man who's been trapped inside a cave in South Wales for 2 days. He's been unable to move after reportedly injuring his back in a fall in the Brecon Beacons. He was climbing one of the UK's largest caves. Marks & Spencer has introduced pronoun-inclusive name badges for staff. The idea, which came from an employee, means that workers can now wear whichever combination of pronouns they choose. The supermarket chain says the initiative is a simple yet impactful way to make sure LGBTQ+ identities are respected. Now, a dress worn by Amy Winehouse has sold for more than £180,000 at auction, 16 times the original estimate. The halter neck was worn by the singer during her final stage performance just a month before her death at the age of 27. More than £3 million was raised from the sale of over 800 items, including clothing, handwritten notes and Amy's accessories. You're bang up to date. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Thanks for that. Well, with me until 7 o'clock, my panel, political consultant Emma Burnell, academic Dr. Lisa McKenzie, and never let it be said that women are the more reliable sex. I wouldn't have that said. I mean, it might be true. Clearly it is true, because also joining me tonight is Lee Jones, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, but he's running late. He'll be here very soon. Also, you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us and our thoughts. I like to know what you think. What is going on your mind tonight? Your thoughts on all the stories. You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or on Twitter @MichelleDewbs or @GBNews. I tell you what, you just heard, by the way, in the news update there, the story about M&S and, you know, the name badges, the pronouns. You should have heard the reaction from these two. I think it was safe to say you're not a fan.
No,
Lisa,
not really.
don't sit on the fence now, because I'm
not going to sit on the fence. He's like, you know, my name's Lisa. Get over it.
I know, but it's not about your name. It's about your pronouns.
Oh, I know. Well, I've gone so far being known as she, Lisa. I'm not about to change it anytime soon.
Emma, we're not supposed to be talking about this, but I can't help but land you all in, because I could hear your reactions. What's your reactions to that?
I mean, if people want... I can't imagine a situation in a shop where I need to know your pronoun is the problem. I don't tend to refer to oi she or oi you.
Or oi them.
But my worry would be that some people will feel under pressure to do this who don't actually have a strong sense that they don't really want to identify their pronouns.
Yeah, well, I've got to say, I wasn't actually planning on talking about that, but after hearing their reaction, I couldn't help myself. My view on that story is that the world is going mad. Anyway, my pronouns, if you want them, by the way, is well, I just refer to anything. I get called all kinds, I've got to say, and I respond to most of it. Anyway, let's move on to our top story. I'll get back on track. Don't worry, our top story tonight. The spotlight, of course, is firmly on our politicians right now, isn't it? You know, sleaze, corruption, they kind of seem to be the word of the day, don't they? Those words are ringing loudly. And the focus as well as we to second jobs and whether MPs should be allowed to have them, and if so, to what extent. There's been some polling out today, depending on how much importance you place on pollings. The latest one by Ipsos Mori shows that the Tories have lost their lead over Labour. This is a poll conducted, as I said, for Ipsos Mori for the Evening Standard, and was carried out between October the 29th and November the 4th. It's got Labour on 36%. The Tories at 35%, that's 4 points down since September. Greens on 11%, and the Lib Dems on 9%. But I've got to say, given that there isn't a general election coming up anytime soon, I've got to say, so what? And an emergency debate, by the way, is underway in the Commons right now this evening over parliamentary standards. There's been strong words already from the opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who's accused the government of corruption. He says Boris Johnson damaged himself and his party with last week's vote over Owen Paterson. Let's have a little listen.
These are vitally important matters to you, Mr. Speaker, and to the whole House. But before I set out the government's position today, I would like first and foremost to express my regret and that of my ministerial colleagues over the mistake made last week. We recognise that there are concerns across the House over the standards system and also the process by which possible breaches of the Code of Conduct are investigated. I will in a minute. Yet while sincerely held concerns clearly warrant further attention, the manner in which the government approached last week's debate conflated them with the response to an individual case.
Got to say, on Dewbs and Co, I do like to keep you on the ball. I like to keep you on your toes. And if you're on your toes, you will have noticed that that wasn't Sir Keir Starmer at all. That was Stephen Barclay there. In a nutshell, amongst other things, he was expressing his regrets over the mistakes made by the government over that Patterson vote. I wonder. Do get in touch with me, by the way, and let me know your thoughts. But Lisa, yours.
I mean, does this come up every year? Because it appears to come up every year. You know, what sleaze is about, who's taking envelopes, what they're getting out of these envelopes. So, I mean, personally, I think that, I mean, for a start, this debate that they're having is simply a debate. Nothing is going to happen. There's no vote. There's no change going to come. It's just a debate. And
tabled by the Lib Dems, I think it was, as well.
Yeah, and, you know, nothing's going to happen. For me, the problem is the system, Parliament, the whole structure of it. I think even when you get people who really want to do good for society and they go in there, I think the system ultimately corrupts them.
Do you?
Yeah.
So you think you're going good, you get kind of corrupted by the system and you pop out less good?
Yeah, I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I do think that.
Is that fair? What's your view?
No, I don't think that Parliament necessarily corrupts people. I think that there are issues, particularly with the different approaches of the parties. I think it would be fair to say that this at the moment is very much a Conservative Party problem. 2 weeks ago, they were in trouble for pouring effluent into the rivers, and this week it's been effluent all over their own backbenches. They are not happy, and they feel that they have been left in the effluent. I'm going to keep using that word.
That's a very sophisticated word.
Well, yeah, I'm being kind to our tea time viewers.
You're remembering it's tea time. Yeah, but hang on just a minute, because it's all well and good, Labour throwing all these stones and going on about corruption and sleaze and all the rest of it, and saying how it's all restricted to the Tories. The reason that a lot of this is prevalent within the Tories is because it's them that's in power. So there's a lot of frustration at the moment about how many Tory MPs are earning a lot of money outside of their jobs. Well, that's because they're the powerful ones at the moment. If you're gonna pay an MP, presumably because you want some kind of influence within Parliament. I'm not saying that's right. Obviously, it's not right, but that's what people do. These organisations are paying huge amounts of money because they want that influence. You're not going to get your influence from the opposition, are you? So, of course, it's going to be predominantly Tories.
Well, it will be predominantly Tories while the Tories are in power, but actually, and the system should change for everybody. And
what do you want to change? What does that mean?
I think, personally, that we can have a system whereby we don't have second jobs in any private sector, because why should you?
I mean, I think we should also remember as well, while you're sort of saying this is, you know, Tories, that there's been 2 Labour MPs in the last 2 years who's been convicted of crimes.
Absolutely, and I'm very, very glad that they've been thrown out of the Labour Party. I wish the Tories could say the same thing about Robert Robertson. It's actually really important because good MPs work incredibly long hours, incredibly difficult hours, doing an incredibly hard job. They have a job that's made up of so many different parts, the parts that are based in their constituency, where they're dealing with very desperate people, and the parts that are based in Parliament, where they're having to scrutinise legislation on such a huge range of issues. They need to do a really large amount of background work to understand the slightest bit of what they're talking about and what they're doing. There is no need for anyone earning 80 plus grand to need a second job. There are a few occasions where if, for example, you're a GP, then you do need to put in a certain amount of hours, and I think that could probably be, there could be exceptions for non-profit making companies to do your hours. If you're an Army reservist, you have to do a certain amount of hours. Again, I think that could be a carve-out. But there's no need for them to go into these consultancies earning a ton of money for what is basically just buying influence, not buying decent advice.
Well, I found an interesting quote today. In 1995, the Committee on Standards in Public Life, chaired by Lord Nolan, said the following: a Parliament composed entirely of full-time professional politicians would not serve the best interests of democracy. It goes on to say, the House needs, if possible, to contain members with a wide range of current experience which can contribute to its expertise. So, Lisa, if all you've got is politicians doing politicking, don't they lose touch then with the real world?
Well, I think you do need a wide range of people who represent. I'm not sure whether they need to represent in this one big palace in the middle of London. I'm not sure that that's the best place for them to be. But it's not diverse at all. It's not diverse, and the party political system keeps it narrow. And so for me, that's why
What's not diverse?
Well, the MPs that are in there, you know, the types of people that are in there.
Yeah,
For a start, you've got to be either on one side or another. You know, for a free thinker who perhaps wants to serve a community that they've grown up in and lived in, unless you are part of that party system, you're going up against it constantly.
Well, let's look at the last 2 years.
And they kick you out. The system makes sure that there are only particular types of people who get in.
Take away from public services. Look at the people on the sharp end of the last 2 years, people working in retail. How many people in Parliament have got that kind of shop floor background? Very, very few. And that's what, I mean, yeah, it's all very well saying they have to have a range of backgrounds, but what they mean when they say that is, how have you been a lawyer, or have you been a business leader, or have you been a doctor? And that's not diverse.
I agree with you.
Isn't there a little bit of jealousy going on here? When people see people's earnings and they realise that an MP gets about 82 grand, I think it is, as a base salary, of course, then you get your expenses and whatnot. But when people then hear, well, hang on a minute, he or she, they've got 100 grand extra as a consultant, isn't there an element of that that's a little bit of jealousy? I wonder.
I mean, I'm jealous of the 80 grand, to be honest with you. But
you could stand as an MP then.
Oh, God, I would not for £1 million.
I stood as an MP once.
Did you?
Yeah.
How did you get on?
I got 53 votes.
Did you? Who did you stand for?
Class war.
Oh, did you now?
Yeah, because I wanted to bring a different voice to the platform. I didn't want to be an MP. But
what would you have done if you'd accidentally won?
I don't know. I did think about that actually. I was quite worried about that, but you know, obviously I didn't need to worry. I got 53 votes.
But all candidates convince themselves at some point they'll win. So I'm sure you had a moment.
No, I don't. No. I was standing against Ian Duncan Smith. No, I had no grandiose ideas of being an MP. But I did want to bring a different voice into the political system, in the political arena.
But I think it's quite hard, isn't it? I think because we have first past the purse, we don't have PR, and a lot of people will, you know, I know people will shout at the screen and say we had a referendum on PR. I think it was about 2014 or something. I'm thinking off the top of my head. So
2011, I think.
Yeah. Was it 2011? I was going to say
Scotland.
I was going to say if I had the year wrong, don't shout at me because it's off the top of my head. But I remember we had that referendum, and people will say, well, if people wanted PR, proportional representation, they'd have voted for it then. But what I would push back and say to that is actually it was only once there was that election where UKIP ran and got all of those votes and didn't get the seats. Now, I don't care what you think or don't think to UKIP, that's irrelevant. What I'm saying is, how can you have a party that gets millions of votes or over 1 million votes and doesn't get that reflected in the seat numbers? And to your point, I think we'll always have that situation where the two main parties kind of trump it all, don't they? Because we've got that first past the post. Delta's got in touch on email and says, if the MPs aren't allowed a second job, then can we make sure doctors who work in the NHS taking taxpayer-funded salaries can't work in the private practice as well? Roy on the email says, well, I think MPs should have a second job so that they don't lose touch with the real world. Michael says, in truth, we all criticise, but in reality, few are willing to put themselves forward. He says, I don't subscribe to the view that all MPs are corrupt. I don't think anyone said that all MPs are corrupt, by the way. Someone else has said MPs have in the past attacked workers such as firefighters for having a second job, yet to do it themselves, they say it's hypocrisy. Stephen says that pressure from lobbying isn't just a Tory problem. Indeed. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be asking universities, do you think they should accept money from so-called tainted sources to benefit their students?
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. What a treat, we found him. He joins us. This is Lee Jones, and I'll give him his correct title, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. Good evening to you, Lee.
Good evening. I'm sorry I'm joining you late.
Yes, he's late. He said he blamed it on TfL, didn't you? But you're here, we saved the best till last, and we'll start with you, because today I found myself pondering, when it comes to money, do you think it needs to come from so-called reputable sources in order to be used for good? The reason, of course, I'm pondering this is because the University of Oxford and the University of London have been criticised for accepting donations from a charity established using money once left by fascist leader Oswald Mosley. This has caused some to question whether university donations should be vetted by an official watchdog. The donations have previously been used to fund student accommodation and foundation years, which can, of course, help to increase diversity and support students from low-income backgrounds. But I wonder, was it right then for universities and other institutions to have accepted this money in the first place? Lee, your views?
I think, generally speaking, universities shouldn't accept money that derives from immoral or illegal sources, and they shouldn't accept money that restrict the academic freedom of their staff either. So those are two important general points. But in this case, if you look at where the Mosleys actually got their money from, it's not like Oswald Mosley made the family fortune by being a fascist. The family's wealth dates back to the 12th century. They're a part of the landed aristocracy. So if the money's tainted, it's not really tainted by fascism as much as it's tainted by feudalism and capitalism. It's ill-gotten wealth, just like the vast majority of philanthro-capitalists today.
But hang on a second, because that's all well and good in the history of the wealth. But some people might push back on that and say, well, hang on a second, because Max Mosley's son died quite young to do with drugs. This is all about now creating a positive legacy. So yes, you can talk to the past and you can say where the money's come from. But just because the money has come from what some might call, to put it mildly, a tainted source, what does that mean? That means that it stops there. Can it not be used for good going forward just because of its historic links to the past?
I think it can, potentially. I mean, obviously, philanthro-capitalists are in the business of reputation laundering. Someone like Bill and Melinda Gates, for example, they made their money through the massive exploitation of markets and workers, and now they want to be remembered for good. I don't really think anybody knows very much about the son of Max Mosley, the grandson of Oswald Mosley. They don't really know very much about him. He died of a heroin overdose in 2009. I don't think he has a particularly bad reputation that needs laundering. The charitable trust is in his name. That money has been used to support physics at Oxford and forensic science at UCL, and to train people in Africa in how to do radio journalism. It doesn't seem that nefarious to me. Seems that something much worse that the Charitable Trust does has sponsored Impress, the so-called independent press regulator, which Max Mosley helped to establish to try to muzzle the press. And that, to me, seems much more nefarious. But as long as there are no strings attached to the money, I think that money can potentially be used for good.
Lisa?
I mean, I've worked in universities for quite a long time now, and if I thought that this money was going to go for any sort of good at all, I would say, you know, bring it on. But it's going to Oxford University, that's not known for its diversity. It's not known for its widening its participation, and I do wonder where that money would go. I also struggle a bit with this because I don't know if you all remember the sort of Rhodes Must Fall.
Of course, Cecil Rhodes, yeah.
But and that always was puzzling for me because the statue needed to fall, and that was fine. If students wanted to pull the statue down, I think that's fine.
Do you? So hang on. So a student that benefits from a grant.
But yeah, but that's where my argument is they still had the money. So the grants was, you know, the money they wasn't objecting to. So they said we'll still have the Rhodes scholarships, but we don't want the Rhodes statue. So I thought that was really hypocritical, actually, because if you don't want the statue, don't take the money either.
Indeed. Emma, your thoughts?
I think the key thing is what is the money doing? What influence is it having, both directly, contractually, but also in the sort of soft influence. I would have less problem with money from a charitable source that has very specific regulation about what it can and can't fund than I do about, for example, a lot of these people taking money from the Chinese government, who would be considerably more nefarious, in my opinion, and certainly more authoritarian, and likely to be much more likely to clamp down on academic criticism of their government. I think that what you're doing when you're giving this money, though, is exactly as you said, buying influence. And there's a reason they're giving this money to Oxford and not Keele. And actually, it's probably not doing the most good that it could do with the best investment.
I remember I used to argue with my students about this. They did actually agree with me after a while about the Stormzy money. Do you remember sort of Stormzy he put money into Cambridge?
Yeah.
And I used to say to the students where I used to work at Middlesex University, which was mostly North London working class students, you deserve that money. Why haven't you got the money? And they say, yeah, but Cambridge is such a better place. And so when that money is used to...
So hang on, so what was your problem with that Stormzy thing? Where the money was going?
Yeah, because I thought that Stormzy's money would do much better in a university that is really diverse.
But what's it got to do with you, where someone donates their money to? If you feel so strongly about underrepresented universities, why don't you seek to make a load of money to channel it into diverse universities?
Do you know what, Michelle? I've been trying to make a load of money all my life and I've failed miserably.
But I do...
in the wrong industry.
I always find it quite... Bjorn's been in touch on the email saying if money is given without conditions to an institution of learning, it doesn't matter who it comes from. There's another slippery slope here. He says, who decides on the definition of reputable? And I think that's a very important question, isn't it? Because one person's tainted would be another person's, I don't know, I'll use your example. You say about Microsoft, and you would describe, you just described Bill and Melinda Gates as making their money from basically exploiting people. Other people would say, well, hang on a minute, Bill Gates made his money from being incredibly entrepreneurial, innovative, and changed the world for the good. So who's right, who's wrong? I don't know. It's down to opinion, isn't it? So good point there from Bjorn. Joe on Twitter says they shouldn't accept any donations from anyone. Well, where do they get the money from then, Joe? Dot on Twitter says, ridiculous virtue signalling. Money can do good, so where on earth is the problem? And I do think that's an interesting question there, Dot, because it's at what point does money actually stick and get shackled to its past? Where at what point do we say, well, actually, there's needs now? And also, by the way, if somebody has made their money in ways that you don't agree with, then surely it's like the almost the ultimate kind of, I'm trying to think the word, I know the word I want to use, I'm trying to think to a tea time equivalent, but it's the ultimate, you know what I mean, to the person. Yeah, to the person that's perhaps, you know, done something you don't approve of, if that money is then taken for good. Anyway, get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Let's move on. This week, investment company State Street have said that their staff will need special approval to hire a white man instead of a woman or a person from a diverse background. State Street employs 2,500 people in Ireland and is aiming to increase diversity within the company. But I wonder, do you think this is a step too far? What about diversity within a workplace? Does ticking diversity box trump talent, or is it a balance of the two? Emma, your thoughts?
I think the question really is, what do we consider to be talent? I think that's actually what we should probably be investigating, rather than saying, well, I've got X many black people, X many women, X many people. How many different experiences are we seeing? How many different viewpoints?
Well, how would you define talent? Because I think it's quite an easy thing.
Well, I don't think it necessarily is, because what one person will bring to a company in terms of their background, experience, their street smarts, might not be measurable on a CV. It might not be measurable in an interview, but you get so much more out of somebody who doesn't have the academic credentials that you see in most job adverts above a certain level. So you're never going to get those viewpoints, and that's the problem. It's not about making sure that you've got a different looking but actually very similarly background group of people. It's about making sure that you're seeing a really, really diverse group of viewpoints and group of experiences, so that you are representing a client base that has that diverse group of viewpoints and group of experiences. If you're just a bunch of people who, whatever you look like, whatever your sexuality, your race, your physicality, you've actually got a very similar background and viewpoint, then you're not diverse. Whereas, so I think that the problem is not so much hiring specifically on diversity, but thinking about what we mean by talent and how we broaden actually our definition of talent.
Interesting. Lee, your thoughts?
Well, what always strikes me about this is how compatible this diversity and inclusion agenda is with corporate power. It doesn't matter to a company like this. It doesn't matter to big companies to pursue a diversity and inclusion agenda. It doesn't bother them one iota. If this was against their interests, they would resist it, and they wouldn't write this into senior executives' annual targets to have more women and more minority ethnic people and so on. It's compatible with their agenda. So this is seen as some kind of radical, left-wing critique of the status quo, but it obviously isn't, because captains of industry are quite happy to take this on. And that's because it doesn't really change the way these companies operate. You can have more women in the boardroom, you can have more black people in the boardroom, you can have trans people, disabled people, gay people. It really doesn't matter if the company is doing the same thing that it's always done, which is operating on the basis of the profit principle, not under democratic control, and siphoning wealth off to wealthy shareholders.
But then would you say, so when it comes to, obviously, one of the core reasons for a private organisation is to create a profit for its shareholders. But then do you think we're getting to the point now where actually the amount of profit an organisation can make is impacted by how diverse an organisation is? Because, for example, consumers now are becoming more demanding, I guess, of the companies that they use, the products that they buy. So do you think there's a direct correlation and change there?
Some are, but I think there might also be the question may go in the opposite direction, which is how much money are companies spending on these kinds of initiatives? And is that to the direct benefit of shareholders? So certainly in some industries you can imagine that going woke capitalism is a money spinner. It will appeal to a certain consumer base, a certain customer base. In others, it will just be seen as an extra cost to business. And that's why I think you can see this is actually quite uneven across the corporate sector. Some companies are not going for this at all. Others are bought into it entirely, because I think sometimes it's very smoothly compatible with the image that a company wants to project to the world. In some cases, it's totally irrelevant. Like if you're selling CCTV equipment, for example, you're probably not going to really go down this line because it's not very beneficial. But if you're in the industry of reputation management, PR, consumer goods, then all the much better for you.
Lisa?
I would say, what is talent, but what is diversity? Because, I'm going to bring the C word in here because that word never gets aired.
What C word?
class.
I tell you, me and you've got very different. The C word that was on my mind was not.
Well, it usually is on mine, but tea time.
Right.
But,
yeah. I'm back in the room. I'm with you.
But class, we never talk about class.
Absolutely.
So what we've got here is, we've got a very, very diverse cabinet, but they all went to the same schools. They all went to the same universities. They studied the same sorts of things. So, there's diversity and then there's diversity. And I do wonder what would happen if, working class people did have those opportunities to get through. And for me, that's what's important here. It's not so much the diversity, whether they're women or black or disabled. It really is about unearned advantages, but also unearned disadvantages, because both can be unearned.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting when it comes to diversity, there's a lot of focus on physicality, so whether that's skin colour, whether that's, your abilities, whether that's your gender, whatever it is. And I always find it fascinating that all these companies that go on about, oh, we're so diverse, the one thing that they don't have much diversity in is diversity of thought. And yes, okay, you get different opinions and viewpoints based on different worldviews and experiences, but I often think, if I think about harping back to a debate we just had about educational institutions, you try having a right of centre viewpoint or a right-leaning political viewpoint in some of these organisations, and often you won't last very long. So there's diversity and then there's real diversity, and I always find that quite interesting. Anyway, you guys are getting in touch, lots of you. Tony says it shouldn't be about the colour of skin, etc., but who is the most capable for the job. John says, once again, the white man is being penalised. Gary, again, it doesn't matter. It should be whoever is the right person for the job, no matter what background. Simmer says diversity seems limited in the UK to work and media. Many groups go completely unrepresented, while the same few are always to the fore. Sam Cook says equal opportunities are important for all. I do think there's something in your working class point though as well, Lisa, because often people in the working class, these opportunities are not visible to them.
No.
And I heard somebody somewhere, I can't take any credit for it because it wasn't me, but someone said you can't be what you can't see.
Absolutely.
And if you are a working class kid, I'll use my hometown, say in somewhere like Hull, and you don't know, you're not exposed to the opportunities, say in the City of London, the investment opportunities, etc., then how do you even know to aspire to that? It's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. Nigel Farage will be on at 7. He'll be joined for Talking Pints by Tony Blair's political secretary, John McTainer. I mean, that got a laugh there, and I'll wonder why when I'm in the break, but don't go away, I'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight from 9 p.m, has COP26 become an orgy of hypocrisy? Insulate Britain and net zero skeptic MP Philip Davies will battle it out in the clash. Is Matt Hancock right that NHS workers be forced to get the COVID jab before the winter or face the sack? And have lockdown skeptics lost the war of common sense? Toby Young weighs in. Plus, businesswoman Bernie Spofforth gives her first interview after fighting back against Twitter's censorship of inconvenient COVID truths. That's Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m, Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, welcome back. Charles has got in contact. He says, he agrees with you, Lisa. He says that there is still a big class divide in the UK. Goes on, talks about the media. Many in the media are happy to have black presenters, for example, or diversity when it comes to presenters. But he asks, how many people do you see, for example, with Cockney accents, regional accents? I tell you, I've got a regional accent, and you want to hear the abuse that I get every day of my life. I get abuse for my accent and what I sound like. If you've watched the show a while, you'll know that I've been told to have elocution lessons. I've been asked what's wrong with me. And I think it is quite unusual to hear a regional accent on the TV. As for what's wrong with me, I mean, we don't have long. We've only got 20 minutes. Anyway, let's move on. I wonder, a very serious topic here, and one that I've certainly got very strong views about, and I know that many of you will have too. Because do you think it's selfish to work in the care industry and not be vaccinated? Of course, the reason that I ask you this is because this week you'll know that the rules for mandatory vaccination, if you work in the care sector, will be enforced. There's a lady that's kind of gone quite viral online. She's called Louise Acaster. It was her last day very recently. I think we've got a little clip of her view.
That's the hardest thing you've ever had to do. That's it. Goodbye to everybody, all the people that I've cared for so long, the people I've worked with, because it's been so emotional. This is so unfair.
See, that clip has really divided opinion online, but just to put this into context, about 60,000 unjabbed care workers could lose their jobs now if they fail to get fully vaccinated by the 11th of November. There's real fears now in terms of the job vacancies that this would leave, because this is a sector, like many, that's struggling for talent and for people to fill their roles anyway. So I wonder, a lot of the criticism on the back of that comment there is people saying, oh, that lady is so selfish. If she wants to work as a care worker, she absolutely should have this vaccination. Got to say that is not a view that I share. But before I give you my thoughts, Lee, your thoughts?
Selfishness is okay when it comes to medical interventions. You know,
what do you mean by that?
We have something called the Nuremberg Code, which grew out of the war crimes trials at the end of the Second World War. And it established the principle of free, prior and informed consent for all medical interventions or experiments. It means that if you're going to take a medicine or have some kind of procedure or participate in a trial, you must give your free, prior and informed consent. You can't be coerced. So you're allowed to be selfish when you decide what goes into your body. That is the principle of bodily autonomy. So that's a really important principle that I think we have to maintain. Beyond that, when it comes to the specifics of the COVID vaccine, we have to remember that this is a disease which mostly affects older people. The younger you are, and if you're free of comorbidities, other diseases that make the disease worse, the less benefit you get from the vaccine anyway. And there are some quite severe, potentially life-threatening side effects. They're rare, but so is it rare to die of COVID, for example, if you're under the age of 50. So people may have good reasons to be hesitant. The other thing to bear in mind, I think, is the vaccines do not prevent you getting the disease or spreading it. Public Health England data clearly show that between vaccinated and under-vaccinated groups, the case rate doesn't change. And recent UK study published in The Lancet just last week showed that it's just as transmissible. the main benefit that you get is you don't have the same disease burden, meaning that you suffer less. So you're less likely to suffer a serious disease and be hospitalised. And obviously, if you are in the age range or in the health categories where you are vulnerable to the disease, you therefore should be strongly encouraged to get the vaccination. But to my mind, there is no case for coercion. There's no case for vaccine mandates. And these people should not be losing their jobs just because they want to exercise their right of bodily autonomy.
Excellent. Your thoughts?
Well, I think bodily autonomy should also apply to those people who live in care homes and need to have the choice not to have people bringing COVID into their homes. It's a really complicated crisis, and essentially we're not choosing one crisis and not choosing another. They are, you know, it would have been a crisis either way. So what had to happen was you had to choose a strong decision that way or a strong decision that way, and we've gone in terms of vaccine mandates. There is a crisis in care recruitment that goes far beyond COVID. It was a massive crisis before the COVID. It will be a massive crisis after COVID. There are huge things that we should be talking about far beyond the vaccine mandate, about how we value those people who work in care, about how we make sure that care homes are properly regulated, about how we make sure that our elderly, the people who've given us their whole lives, are given dignified treatment. And that can mean for them choosing not to have people who have not chosen to have a vaccine in what is essentially their home.
As with so many COVID policy areas, though, this is completely irrational and inconsistent, because care home workers have a vaccine mandate. They've got to get vaccinated. Care home residents and their visitors don't have to get vaccinated. So if the worry is people bringing the disease into care homes, that is totally inconsistent and irrational. And that's what so many people are reacting against.
You've got all kinds of people going into care homes. You'll have supplying staff. You'll have all manner of things.
You'll get no argument from me that the government has been irrational, inconsistent and erratic. That doesn't mean that I necessarily believe that we shouldn't be thinking about how to deal best with care homes. And I'm going to put the side things further.
I'm going to put the side of the care home worker. I've got family members and friends who work in care homes. They get paid very little money and they do a fantastic job. And they have worked every single day of the pandemic. Some of my family members have not been vaccinated and don't want to be. And they do stand to lose their jobs. They are...
What would their reasons be, Lisa, for not having it?
They're not sure about it yet. They're not sure. And the thing is, I agree with Lee. I'm not, you know, Lee is very articulate, but I agree with Lee. Before you have something put in your body, you should, you know, you've got to be, it's a thin end of the wedge if you force people to put things into their body that they are not sure about. They're not sure about it.
I don't think we're very sure about most of the things we put in our body.
But mandating that, are you suggesting that you should mandate this vaccine to care home workers?
I'm saying that I understand the rationale behind it. I think that it's a difficult public policy choice, and they would have either way.
Do you agree with
I
it?
think there would have been more deaths in care home if they hadn't mandated it, and we would have been having a go about that. So yes, ultimately, I think on a 49-51% basis, I probably would have gone in that
the women who I know have been working in those care homes every single day since the pandemic.
The women you know have been treated appallingly. Is absolutely something I'm not arguing with.
They've been tested. They get tested all the time.
3 times a week.
Yeah, they get tested all the time. So there are other ways. And I just think, you know, these are working class women who do a fantastic job, who actually have got a lot of love for the, you know, to say that they're selfish and don't care about those people.
But I'm not saying that.
No, I know you're not, but I don't.
But many people are saying that.
I really don't like this narrative that, you know, they don't care. I mean, you know, when the rest of us was ordering Deliveroo every day, they were going into work. That really upsets me, actually. But don't dare call them selfish.
No, absolutely not. They're incredibly hardworking, deserve to be far better respected in a massive, broad area of ways. Whether we go down to this narrow thing about whether there should be a vaccine mandate, actually there's a much, much bigger and more important debate to be had about how we undervalue care.
We're talking today about the mandate. The reason we're talking about the mandate is because it comes into force this week, and I've just showed you the video there. There'll be many, many more thousands of people that have to leave their job because of it. That's why I'm making it narrow and specific about this topic. I think it's incredibly important. I think these mandates are appalling. It astonishes me that you can actually mandate that somebody has to be injected with something for which there is no long-term safety data, and that you would sit there with a straight face and tell somebody that if you're not injected with this stuff, you can't go to work. It blows my mind. I think it's appalling. Don't get me started. Lee, you was going to come back in.
Well, I just think we've got to refocus on the science of the vaccine. You know, if the vaccine could stop you spreading the virus, then we might want to have a conversation about the responsibilities of people who work with very vulnerable people. But it doesn't. It doesn't stop you spreading it.
I mean,
so it's actually irrational as well as illegitimate, in my view.
So what do you think is driving it then, Lee?
Sorry?
What do you think is driving it then?
I mean, you are quite right to say that the deaths in the care homes was a scandal in the first wave in particular, because the government initiated its surge plans in the pandemic preparedness strategy and discharged COVID patients into care homes without any testing being available, which seeded it into the most vulnerable part of the population. So therefore, the government is very concerned about that happening again, and therefore I think it's gone down the coercion route. I think also the government hasn't tried hard enough to reach out to those populations and tell them why they should get it. You know, encouragement has to be exhausted before mandates are tried. I don't think mandates would be acceptable, to be entirely clear. But I don't think the government has done enough to reach those people in those care homes, to educate them about the risks and benefits, and then they can take an informed decision themselves. Because there is a lot of misinformation circulating about the vaccines, that is true. But in the end, I think it has to be the decision of the individual when we live in a free society.
Yeah, and lots of you guys are getting in touch as well. I found this one fascinating, saying, someone's been in touch saying, I firmly believe that those people that choose not to have the jab should be denied care should they then contract COVID. And I tell you, people don't stop there. People get in touch with me on this show and say that if you don't have the jab, you should just not have any treatment on the NHS. Full stop. I find that absolutely ridiculous, because where are you going to draw your line? Are you going to say to people, if you drink alcohol and you get a problem, you can't have care from the NHS? If you're going over the speed limit and you crash your car, should you not be cared for by the NHS? If you go skiing, fall down and hurt yourself, should you not be cared for the NHS? If you take drugs, I've got to say, I find that a very strange argument to run. Anyway, before I go, which we don't have long to go, I'm afraid, but there's a very brief story that caught my eye and made me chuckle earlier on today, so it did. This was a story, I think it's a cafe in Dorset. They've been running it's a seafood restaurant, and they offered a 3-course meal for £15, so basically a pensioner's special, on a Tuesday and a Friday. Anyway, they ended up stopping it. They pulled their promotion of their pensioners special because they were getting treated rudely by the elderly. It really made me laugh. And I wonder, I thought that manners used to be the thing that was, it's been there for forever and a day, hasn't it? So why? Do you think the elderly are losing their manners, Lee?
I think rudeness is rife across society.
Do you?
I do. And old people are just as capable of being rude as young people.
Do you? Your thoughts?
I think that if you run a private business, it's up to you who you offer promotions to. And if people are being rude to you, you have, doesn't matter how old they are, you have a right to sling them out.
Your thoughts?
I don't think 15 quid is actually that much of a promotion, is
well,
it?
I don't.
Depends what you get for it.
I thought that was quite expensive, actually. So,
I did.
Where I live in Nottingham, I mean, you can get fish and chips for a lot less than that.
As a pensioner special as well?
Yeah, as a pensioner special. So I didn't think that was actually such a great promotion. But, and I do know, again, I've got lots of family members and friends who work in these sort of industries, and people are very rude and treat them not very well.
Yeah, and the moral of the story is, if you want your promotion, whatever that is, whether you think it's good value or not, then you've got to behave and you've got to be kind to the people serving you it, whatever your age. Lots of people getting in contact and sticking up for my accent. I appreciate that. Trevor's done it, John's done it, Paul's done it. Steve says you should try having a black country accent, and then I don't even know how to pronounce it. It gives me a little bit. I was about to attempt it. I can do quite a funny Liverpool accent, but you don't need to hear any of that. Anyway, that's pretty much all we've got time for. Lots of people still getting in contact about the care workers. John says, I hope the care workers stick to their principles. Watch the care homes collapse. Thanks to the government being dictators, says John. Interesting. Keep your thoughts coming in. Anyway, that is all we've got time for tonight. Lee, Amy, Emma, thank you very much for your time and thank you for your company. I'll be back tomorrow 6 till 7. Have yourself a very good evening.
Hello again. A lot of cloud overnight for many of us, and rain is sinking south across northern parts of the country, but it will be milder as a result, and then it turns drier and brighter during Tuesday. Here are the weather fronts that are sinking south overnight. In between them, a slice of mild Atlantic air that contains an awful lot of cloud, some thick and low cloud across many parts of the country through the night, and these outbreaks of more persistent rain, initially for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and then sinking into parts of northern England and Wales by the end of the night. Clearing skies, meanwhile, behind the weather fronts for northern Scotland. A lot fresher here as we begin Tuesday, but mild and fairly dismal elsewhere. A lot of cloud, some of that low cloud covering hills, and some spots of rain and